Well, today we're going to take a look at multiplying and dividing rational expressions. In other words, we're going to be multiplying and dividing fractions. And a lot of these problems will have variables in them, so there will be algebraic fractions. Rational, once again, is a fraction. The root word of rational is ratio, so two things being compared to each other. We are not going to be looking at rational equations, which have an equal sign. We'll be looking at rational expressions, so there'll be no equal sign. So all we're going to be doing is simplifying. So if you look at 12 over 8, 12 is 2 times 2 times 3. 8 is 2 times 2 times 2. 2 over 2 is a special form of 1. 2 over 2 is another special form of 1, and multiplying by 1 doesn't make a difference, so it's really just 3 over 2 when you simplify it down. So to just clarify, you can cross things out when it's multiplied by the top and multiplied by the bottom. However, you cannot cross out things that are added to the top and the bottom. So consider 9 over 5. You know 9 is 4 plus 5. Bottom is 5. If you cross out the 5's, that would just leave you with a 4 over 1, and we know 4 is not the same thing as 9/5. So here we need to go ahead and simplify this and then state where it's undefined. Now, to simplify this, we want to factor the top and the bottom. The top's already factored, that's factored, but this is differences of squares, so you can factor that. So now you can cross out things that are the same top and bottom. You'll notice there's a y plus 7 and a y plus 7, both multiplied by the top and the bottom. So in other words, that's a special form of 1. You cross those out, you write what's left. It's only a 3y on top. On the bottom, it's your two parentheses of y plus 3 and y minus 3. Now, when you're looking at where it's undefined, that really happens before you go ahead and simplify the denominator. So that's going to be whenever this denominator is simplified. And when we look at when that denominator is simplified, or equal to 0, sorry, because that's where it's undefined, you set the first to 0, set the second to 0, set the third to 0, you end up getting these for your undefined values. So here, some of you might be tempted to cross this 2 out with that 2. We can't do that because it's not 2 times the whole bottom and 2 times the whole top. Similarly for the A's and the B's. Before you cross stuff out, you have to factor. Well, remember, your first step in factoring is to pull out the greatest common factor. So we'll do that on top. Pull out the greatest common factor on the bottom. Now we want to go ahead and simplify. You know you can simplify in front. Which one has more A's, top or the bottom? Well, the top does, one more. So you know you're going to get an A on the top. So what about this? B minus 2 and 2 minus B, they're not the exact same thing. However, they're very similar. They're just switched around the minus sign. Consider this, 5 minus 3, 3 minus 5, very similar to what we have. That's really 2 over negative 2 or negative 1. Or suppose you consider 4 minus 8 or 8 minus 4. That's negative 4 over 4, which is still minus 1. So when the top and the bottom are switched around the minus sign, it's really just simplifying to negative 1. So we can cross these out and put a negative 1. And then negative 1 times a is negative a. Now, a second way you could have done this problem is you could have went ahead and factored out, still on the top, this. And then on the bottom, instead of pulling out a positive a cubed, you could have pulled out a negative a cubed, and then that would have left you with a b minus 2. Then b minus 2 multiplied by the top and bottom, and then you can see where this would simplify down to your negative a. That's a second way you could have done this problem and still got the same answer. On the top right problem, we can go ahead and factor stuff. Now, it is all written with multiplication. But when you're multiplying fractions, you multiply the top, multiply the bottom. Now you could look at 8 as a 2 cubed, 16 as a 2 to the 4th, And now everything's factored because it's all written with multiplication. Then you could come along and you could say, oh, well, which one has more y's, the top or the bottom? Well, the bottom does by 1. Which one has more 2's, the top or the bottom? Well, the bottom does by 1. Oh, you'll notice that there's a 7 on the top and a 7 on the bottom. They're going to cross out. And then you can say which one has more x's, the top or the bottom. Well, in this case, the top is an x to the first, bottom's x cubed. The bottom has 2 more. And so you could go ahead and do that and then just write what's left. Well, you only have a 1 on top, and then you have your 2 times 3 in the bottom, which is 6. You have a y to the first and an x squared. So that's what you would end up with. So try to do these two quickly and then watch the video. Once again, factor the top, factor the bottom. The x's are going to drop in front. There's one more x in the top. Y minus 3, 3 minus y. They're opposite, so that's going to give you a negative 1. So you have a negative 1 times an x. Write it as one big fraction. Factoring the 6, factoring your 10. Start crossing stuff out, top and bottom. You have a 2 times, oops, sorry. You have a 5 times the top, 5 times the bottom. They cross. 3 times the top, 3 times the bottom. You have an x and an x, which is an x squared, which cancels out this. You have a y to the first here. You have a y to the first here. They cross. You also will notice you have a y here, which is going to cancel out one of these y's. And then you go ahead and you write what's left. The only thing you're left with on the bottom is a z. On the top, you have a 2 and a 2, which you know is 4. And then you still have your x cubed and this y to the first at the end. So here, we'll have our fraction. Instead of dividing by a fraction, we multiply by the reciprocal, so we'll flip it upside down. Now it's just like the last problem. You could write it as one big fraction, taking your 6, writing it as 2 times 3, taking your 20 as 2 squared times 5, and then just start crossing stuff out. So you can cross out your 5s, cross out your 3s. Let's see, then you'll notice you have an x to the first here, an x squared there, leaving you with an x to the first there. You'll notice you have a y to the first here, a y to the first here. And then we look at our a's. Which one has more a's? Top has one more a, so it's gone on the bottom. Same type of thing with the b's. You have b to the first on the bottom, b squared left on top after you simplify that. Then you go ahead and look at what's left. You're left with an x, a, and a b squared on top. And you're left with a 2 squared and a 2 or an 8 on the bottom. So over here, instead of dividing by a fraction, you multiply by the reciprocal, and then you got to factor it. Well, the first fraction, top and bottom, doesn't factor, but the second fraction on the top factors, and the second denominator factors. And then you can start crossing things out. And well, you have a k minus 3 times the top, a k minus 3 times the bottom. You have a k plus 1 on the top, k plus 1 on the bottom. You'll notice when you cross these out, they're similar but switched around the negative sign, so that's a negative 1. In other words, everything crosses out, just left with a negative 1. Here, this big fraction bar, because we have fractions within fractions, this big fraction bar really means division. So we have that top fraction divided by that bottom fraction. But once again, instead of dividing by a fraction, you multiply by the reciprocal. So you flip the second fraction upside down. And then you want to go ahead and start factoring. So that doesn't factor, but this is differences of squares, so you factor that. Now you can cross stuff out. You'll notice you have an x squared times the top and an x cubed times the bottom, so it leaves you one extra x in the bottom. These two are not the same, but they're similar and they're opposite, so it gives you a negative 1. And then you just go ahead and you write what's left. Negative 1 on top, that x in the bottom times the first parenthesis. And that's it. Over here, multiplying fractions. So you got to have everything factored. So the first fraction, nothing factors. Second fraction, you factor the top, doing AC factoring. Factoring the bottom is differences of squares. And then you get this, and then you can start crossing out things that are the same. X plus 2 times the top, x plus 2 times the bottom, x plus 3 times the bottom, x plus 3 times the top. And everything crosses out, so it leaves you with 1.